They told me for years there was no money in podcasting. Well, they were all wrong. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Talking with Tarashuk, the podcast where I, Will Tarashuk, the Tarashuk is in the name, of course, sits down with anyone I find generally interesting. One caveat, they can't have a podcast because they have a podcast. Then they go to my other podcast, the Ambiguous Podcast Solution. But today, I'm speaking with an author. My life in a former life, my career path in a former life. This man is named Barry Soames. He's the author of the Beware of the Banker book. The book is a Maine fiction paperback inspired by the true story of Bonnie and Clyde and follows their story fairly closely. Research from his book came from his own experiences working in a commercial bank. He is the graduate of COPS, which stands for Citizen-Oriented Police School, and has over 25 years involved in the emergency medical services. Barry, there is so much to dig into here, and I'm so excited to get into it. How are you? Welcome to the show. Your very first podcast, man. Welcome. Congratulations.
That is right. You made it possible.
I love that you're dressed in a tie. It's so formal. I'm just in a t-shirt and a sweatshirt because it's comfortable. So yeah. I hope this is how you normally dress and you are normally comfortable. So welcome. Tell people about yourself, what you do, where you're from.
Actually, I'm just getting home from work.
Oh, so, perfect timing.
Still dressed for work.
So what's the day job when you're not writing books?
Right now, I am a rental agent for Avis Rental Cars.
Okay, rent cars, and you're up in Maine.
In Maine. So almost all my work is with tourists coming to Maine and greeting them, getting them into a car, and off they go.
Well, you must be super busy this time of year. The leaves changing up there in Maine? So yes. I would be surprised if my parents went up there. My parents are always up in Maine. They're both retired, so they just travel to New England all over the place.
Yeah. Well, you said you were from Massachusetts.
Yes, I am from Massachusetts. Yeah, it's gorgeous up there this time of year. I'm currently down in Jersey.
Just about at its peak right now.
And you've always been in Maine? Born and raised in Maine?
I was born at the Maine Medical Center in Portland, and I've never lived more than 15 miles from that hospital.
Wow. Okay.
And my ancestors came to Maine back in the mid-1700s.
Yeah, we're definitely going to talk about that. Your grandfather, you're descendant of the founder of the village of Soamesville, the first permanent settlement on Mount Desert Island in Maine. So let me ask you, did your last name come from the town or the town come from the last name?
Town came from the last name.
Town came from the last name. And where is your family originally from?
They came here from Gloucester, Massachusetts.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And then previous to that, from England.
So how did that happen? Like, do you have the story of your direct descendant who found the village? Like, tell me that story.
He was a sea captain based in Gloucester, and came to Maine to get lumber from the Maine forest, trees, whatever, and went back and forth. And I don't know if you're familiar with Mount Desert Island, but there's a fjord that cuts it right down the middle. It's the only fjord on the entire eastern seaboard. And when there were storms, they would go in with their ship and get out of the storm's way by hiding in the fjord. But there were Native Americans that didn't really care to have them come in and and shelter during the storm because that was their territory. So they learned to bring a couple of barrels of rum with them whenever they pulled in, and they traded the rum for safe passage, and eventually became quite friends with them. And several people tried to settle the island, but they were driven away. But my ancestor had good relations, got a grant. At that time, Maine was part of Massachusetts.
Yep.
And got a grant from the governor of Massachusetts that if he could actually settle there, he could start a permanent settlement and claim the property. So he convinced his sailors to come up here to Maine and start this little village and settle there, and start like a lumber yard. And instead of shipping the lumber out, they would mill it there and then send it off on cargo ships. So they settled there and named the town after himself, Soamesville, and the fjord is called Soame Sound.
Wow, that's really cool. So how did you find that out? Like, did you have to go through public record? Like, how do you?
Oh gosh, no.
Or stories passed down from ancestors?
My family lived there right up until my father.
Wow.
On the island.
Okay. Wow.
And so, as a kid, I would go up there summers and, to the song, this is your town. This is Soamesville, which was very cool.
I bet you got free drinks for life over there.
I think you're right. I think you're right. It was funny because my little brother would always say, I'm going to grow up and be the mayor of Soamesville. And I says, well, I want to be fire chief.
So why leave? How come you don't live there now?
My father left because there was just no work there. He came to the city of Portland for a job, and that's where I grew up.
Do you still go back?
Oh yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's the most beautiful place on the face of the earth.
I'm really jealous. You know what? I'm gonna go there just for you. One day I'm gonna go there. I'm gonna tell my parents to go there too. Soamesville, Maine.
And it's right on the edge of Acadia National Park.
So what year was it settled? Like how far back are we talking here?
Oh, 1759, I believe.
Okay. So it was still a colony back. Okay, so that was pre-America.
Yeah, just before the Revolution.
See, because my story with like that time period is that like the house I grew up in was originally a farmhouse in Braintree, Massachusetts. Braintree, Massachusetts.
Braintree, yes.
So if you're familiar with Quincy, Massachusetts, where John Adams and John Quincy Adams were born, that was originally all of Braintree. Like all of modern day Quincy was all of Braintree. Right. So the guy who owned my house, it was built in like, they don't know for sure, but they think it was built in the early 1700s, late 1600s, like 1690s.
Wow.
So the original foundation, like the steps are really steep. There's a brick oven stove in my kitchen that obviously doesn't work. Like the basement's the original foundation, the wood, the nails are the original wooden nails. Yeah. So my connection to that part of the world is literally where I grew up in. But your connection is literally the place your family founded. So I like that because it's just like a fun fact that you can just bring up, and it's always interesting. Someone's always gonna be like, "That's the coolest thing I've ever heard." Because the fact that your ancestors founding a town is one of the coolest things I've ever heard.
Yeah, and I plan to retire there.
No, well,
yeah.
How many more years are you thinking? When's the plan for retirement?
Oh, another 10 years maybe.
Okay, well, keep it going, man. Keep it going. So tell me about the book. Tell me about the book. Beware of the Banker. Give me the pitch. Let's hear it.
It's, well, like you said earlier, it's a modern day version of Bonnie and Clyde. It's a fiction book, Maine fiction book, takes place in Maine. And it's about a banker who, we had a casino come to Maine a few years ago, first one in Maine.
Mm-hmm.
And this banker goes up like every Friday night and budgets $100 and ends up losing $200. And then he finds that he can make more money if he goes to the big casino in Connecticut, Foxwoods, and he starts losing more and more money. And he runs into some loan sharks who help him out of his problems, but they're charging huge interest rates. And then he feels like he's in so much trouble debt-wise that he starts thinking, how can he rob from his own bank? How can he's a branch manager of a small branch, and just sees the cash in the safe every day and just sits there at his desk trying to come up with plans to, embezzle from his bank. And he runs into a young man. There's a bar in Portland that every Tuesday night has $2, what do you call it? $2. Oh, it's $2 Tuesdays. Okay. You can get a pint of beer for $2 every Tuesday night. So he goes to this bar every Tuesday night, and he makes friends with a young man who's a trash man. And, they, for some reason, they're there every Tuesday night together, and they become buddies. And the young man's about 15 years younger than him. And then on Thursday nights, he's a single guy. The branch manager's a single guy. He goes to the same restaurant every Thursday night and gets a big bowl of spaghetti, eats half of it, takes the other half home, to spread out over the weekend. But he has the same waitress every night that he goes there, and she is absolutely stunningly beautiful. And she trusts him because he doesn't make passes at her like every other guy in the restaurant. And she starts to see him as almost a father figure. She grew up having no idea who her father was, and her mother avoided her. Just saw her as a nuisance, and she never really had any close ties with an older man. So she trusts him and becomes, seeing him as almost her father. And then he starts to put a plan together to take advantage of these kids, and decides that he would call one Clyde and one Bonnie and make it a game of it. That, there'll be modern day Bonnie and Clydes. And the kid who's the trash man trusts this guy. He's met him, and he's a banker and all this. And he trusts him. And it turns out he had done time for petty theft, which Clyde had done in the real life. He had served several years in prison. One of the reasons he turned to crime was to get even with the policeman who put him in jail. And the girl, when she was in high school, one of the teachers read the story of Bonnie and Clyde, and she was fascinated with Bonnie. Here was a woman who was standing up, got respect, people listened to her, that sort of thing. And she always had this fantasy of someday I want to be a Bonnie. So one day the guy's having dinner at her restaurant, and he confides to her that he had just found a way to steal from the bank. And I won't go into the details, but it was through making loans to people that, had no possible way of paying them back.
Right.
And he took a commission under the table. And she was fascinated to think that here this customer of hers turns out to be, a thief. And he says he's looking for someone to help him, with a robbery. And her eyes get big, and she says, "I'm your girl." I'm your girl. And she sees it as her way to be Bonnie. So he puts the two together as Bonnie and Clyde, and the story goes from there.
So let's talk about Bonnie and Clyde. Now,
Yep.
I've heard of them. I know who they
Yep.
are. Never saw the movie, read any book, etc.
Yep.
I know they robbed banks, right? They robbed banks.
Yes.
And there's
And gas stations.
and gas stations. And it's a famous scene that's been spoofed a million times in The Simpsons and others, right off the cliff and into the sunset, et cetera, et cetera. But I didn't know it was based on a true story. I learned that from you, that Bonnie and Clyde is based on a true story. So next to Jesse James, the most notorious outlaws in United States history. Oh, that's crazy. So how much how did their story inspire you? Is this something you've been following your whole life? You're head first in a Bonnie and Clyde. You know everything about Bonnie and Clyde.
Yes. There was a movie that came out in the 70s starring Warren Beatty, and he was Clyde, and it was an incredibly fun movie to watch, with all the adventures. And what they would do is choose a bank right on a state line.
Mm-hmm.
And back then, policemen didn't have radios. This was back probably in the 30s, 20s or 30s. Policemen didn't have radios, and they couldn't cross state lines. If there was a car chase, they had to stop at state lines. And so Bonnie and Clyde knew this, so they would purposely rob a bank right on a state line. Then they'd cross the line, and the police couldn't follow them. And the police had no way to radio to the other state, to tell them, watch for this car. And so what they would do is once they crossed the line, they would park and get out of the car and just make faces at the policeman.
Oh my God.
And they just made a joke out of these policemen. And of course it enraged the policemen even more and more because they wanted to catch these kids.
Is that still true today? Can cops from a different state, they can't go into another state and arrest them? They have to go through the other state?
No, they can cross lines. And now they have radios, so they can radio, to other policemen, but no, back then they couldn't, but now they can.
That's crazy. Well, I guess back then, it was 50 states, every state was super different. We're now trying to lump states all together.
But they robbed gas stations just for one reason. Gas stations don't have a lot of cash, but they had gumball machines.
They take the quarters?
They would steal. No, they'd steal the gumballs.
What?
Again, just as a joke.
It's a joke. So they're not only are they thieves and robbers, they're jokesters and tricksters.
Yeah, and love to make. And see, he was in jail, Clyde, for several years, and just said, "I'm going to get even with these policemen, for putting me in jail," and this was his way of doing it.
So, how much research do you think you've done over the years of just Bonnie and Clyde?
There's not that much written about them.
Really?
There really isn't. No.
Why is that? Because they're so famous.
So famous, and I'm not even sure there's a book about them.
Huh.
Most of what you have to research is on Google.
Or newspapers, old newspaper
Well,
articles?
newspapers, yeah.
Huh. Well, interesting. Well, you know what?
So I thought it'd be kind of a cool twist to say, what if Bonnie and Clyde existed today?
And there you go. And that's
And
that's first of your book. Is this your first book?
Yes.
It's your first book. And is it out? Is it currently released?
Yes, it is.
Where can they find it? Where can we buy it?
Amazon or through my website. And I got a cool web address. It's paperbackwriter.biz.
Paperback.biz.
And to get that paperback writer, I thought was so cool.
And we'll put that is really cool. We'll put that in the show notes. Anyone who's interested can go buy it. Highly recommended. So
yeah, I had a ton of fun writing it. So people have a ton of fun reading it.
So this is your first book. How did you become a writer? Because you're as you said, you're selling cars, right? For tourists in Maine.
I'm renting cars.
Excuse me. You're renting cars in Maine. How do you become a writer?
Actually, I was encouraged by a high school English teacher, way back then, for two things. I took a fiction course from him, and he introduced me to books by an author called Kurt Vonnegut. And up until then, we had just really read the classics and that sort of thing. And I'd never read a science fiction book like that with so many cool ideas and strange things, and sparked a great interest in reading. And then we read a book called Great Expectations once. And the teacher wasn't convinced. It was very dull and dreary.
Hemingway, I think. Great Expectations.
No, Charles Dickens.
Dickens.
Yeah.
Dickens.
Yeah. But it was a very dull book, and the teacher was convinced that none of us had really read it. So she asked us to write an essay about one of the characters in the book. Just pick a character and write about him as an essay. And I thought about it, and I said, okay, I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to write a story like I was the character in the book, and what I was thinking during the book, and even after the book, what happened to me afterwards, which really showed that I really understood, what was going inside the character's mind. And when the teacher got it, she was floored, and she read it to the class. She posted it on, the chalkboard. And
you did fan fiction. That's incredible.
No, she just said, "This is just so cool to be so creative."
Yeah.
And that really sparked an interest in writing. And for years, I've been entering little writing contests where, you write a 500-page story, and there are cash prizes and whatever. But I never won any prizes, but I've always enjoyed entering the contest, and the different rules and themes that they have you do really challenges you creatively. And then I took a course in children's writing from a children's literature course. And eventually I saw a woman on television who was a New York Times bestselling author. She'd written over 30 romance novels, really trashy romance novels. But she made writing sound like so much fun, and that she was doing it full time, and just having the time of her life. It was her dream. So I looked her up on the website and found she had an email address, and I sent her an email, said, I saw you on television, and I was so inspired by your enthusiasm, and I'd like to do it myself, but I don't know where to start or where to go, this and that. And about a month later, I got this huge email from her, essentially saying, send me a chapter, think of a book, send me a chapter, and we'll go from there. But I want you to take that first step. And since then, she's coached me a little bit. She's proofread some of my stuff. And she was really the spark that, the kick in the butt that I needed.
That's awesome. Yeah. Writing's hard. Writing is very hard. I tried writing a book in college, right? So the idea was, I'm not going to finish it, so it's fine if I say it, someone can steal it. I saw a music video a long, long time ago. I think it was a Nickelback song. I don't remember. But the characters in the music video had like stopwatches, like timers above their head. And, when it reaches zero, they die. I was like, that's very interesting. That's an interesting concept. So I had the idea of like this scientist, right, who's very, very infatuated with time and time travel, and like the idea of going back in time, and like he has an accident during it in his lab, and he's the only one who has the ability to see the stopwatches above people's heads. And, he can't see his own because that's cheating.
Right.
And like his wife gets pregnant. And his wife's like stopwatch was like, 40 years, whatever. Because the first thing you would do is like, check your parents, you check your mom, you check your wife, your kids, whatever. So his wife has like, 30 years, whatever, normal lifespan of that era. And then he gets her pregnant.
Yeah.
And then that stopwatch goes from 40 years to 9 months.
Right. Oh.
Right.
Cool.
So now he's got to try and find a way to cheat the clock and try and save her life. And there's like a whole other supernatural different thing part of it. But like, I got writer's block. I wrote the first act and then I just stopped and haven't touched it in like 2 years. I stopped. I didn't have an ending. I don't have an ending. I have a beginning, a middle, but I can't think of how to end it. I have all the characters I want, twists and turns, but I can't think of how to end it. So did you ever get writer's block? Or first off, what do you think of that idea? Give me an honest, as an author, a published author, what do you think of that idea? Is it awful or is it great?
I love the idea. A friend of mine shared an idea he has for a book, is to have the police and a gang, a street gang, police on one side, street gang on the other. And you won't know it, but every character corresponds to a chess piece. So as the book goes on, somebody gets killed,
there goes the rook. Yeah.
And as it ends up with one policeman at the end. Checkmate.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
And then he reveals who the characters are, what chess pieces they are. So you can go back and read the book and move the chess pieces.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. That reminds me, because when I was in middle school, we read Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None. Obviously it's a famous tale. But at the end of the book, they had the killer's explanation on how he did everything. So my teacher, not wanting to give us spoilers, took the school copies and ripped out that back chapter in every single book and didn't let us read it. But then, once they finished reading the book, she gave it to us. She gave us a photocopy and said, okay, now read it.
Right.
And it was like the coolest thing ever. But back to my original question, did you ever get writer's block and how'd you overcome it?
Well, with this book, Beware the Banker, I knew where I was headed with it, and I knew the story. Because I wanted to follow Bonnie and Clyde.
That helps. That helps a lot.
So there wasn't so much writer's block. The problem I had is Bonnie and Clyde, in the very end of their life, they were ambushed and shot by the police. Many times. They were. There was no question. The police just kept shooting and shooting and shooting them. So everybody knows how Bonnie and Clyde ended. And here I'm writing a book about Bonnie and Clyde, and I'm trying to keep true to the story. But when you get to the end, it's like, okay, the end.
Yeah.
There's no mystery to this.
Right.
So the challenge was, how do I make the ending, fascinating, interesting? How do I keep people's interest, but yet keep it true to the story? And that was my biggest challenge, was not just giving up and saying, okay, you know how it ends, end of story. But to actually throw in some little curveballs there was kind of a challenge.
It always is. Because you got when they're going left, you sometimes got to throw a right hook. You got to throw a jab. You got to throw an uppercut. Throw a running knee. It's that's the process of writing. And like when you're writing, you have the idea of, oh, this is great. I'm going to say this. Let me jot that down. But another hard part is, it's like when I was writing, it was like, okay, I'm writing, but now I have another idea. Let me go back. And that's a mistake. In my opinion, that's a mistake. Never go back.
Or I find, one thing too is these characters that you write become almost like real, like your family.
Yep.
Because you're creating their personalities, you're getting to know them, what they're thinking, how they interact.
Who's your favorite character? Who's your favorite character?
In the book, it's Acadia.
Acadia. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll leave it at that. Character that was most difficult to write.
Most difficult?
It's a hard question.
Probably Tony, the branch manager.
Okay. Branch manager.
Yeah. Because on the one hand, he's a branch manager, well known in the community, but yet he's plotting to rob his own bank. And how do you mix the two personalities?
Right. So, do you have any? Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Do you have any authors who inspired you? Because I think of Maine, obviously Stephen King, my favorite,
Yeah.
one of my favorite writers. My favorite writer is, well, I've three. I'm cheating. So
Yeah.
J.R.R. Tolkien, because he's the master fantasy.
I've read all this stuff.
Yeah, I have the whole anthology of the History of Middle Earth sitting on my bookshelf. I got through 3 of them, and I have like 8 left. So wish me luck. But because I love the movies, I love the whole world, the world building. I don't know how he did it. He had a lot of time on his hand. And he went to Oxford, so that helped. But my favorite writer for his variety and stories was Michael Crichton.
Really?
And when I heard he passed, I was very upset. 'Cause I have most of his books. The first Jurassic, people don't know Jurassic Park is based on a book. The first Jurassic Park is excellent. The second Jurassic Park is also excellent. Congo that he wrote is excellent. Prey is excellent. He wrote so many other books I still need to read. But he's definitely my favorite author in terms of variety.
Well, I mentioned earlier Kurt Vonnegut. Are you familiar with his books?
I am not, but please enlighten me.
Oh, God. It's all science fiction.
Oh, perfect. So yeah, Michael Crichton was all science fiction as well.
Yeah. His first most popular book, he was a prisoner of war in World War II. And the first book is about the bombing of Dresden and what he went through. And he's also able to travel through time. And he goes back and forth from Earth to a planet called Tralfamadore. And the Tralfamadorans keep him in a glass cage so they can all stand around it and watch him, this earthling. But they're all two-dimensional figures, so he can't see them. And they decide that he needs a mate. So they bring up a beautiful Hollywood actress to be his mate. And he goes back and forth from Tralfamadore to his home and this and that. His children start to worry about him. Dad, hello, where have you been? So it's a great story, but it also talks a lot about the war and what he went through and that sort of thing. But he's written other books, Cat's Cradle, and he's written dozens of books, but just fabulous, fabulous writing, and just a lot of bizarre concepts. And his imagination is fantastic. But I also like Ernest Hemingway.
Yeah, Hemingway's. We read a lot of Hemingway in high school. Let me tell you something. Hemingway, a lot of his books kind of follow the same structure. A lot of alcohol, but it's Hemingway.
Well, but people go off and do different things during the day. Then they all get together at a bar at night and talk about them, and they just all become good friends. And no matter what story it is, that's kind of the theme.
Yeah, if you have an author that doesn't like Hemingway, that's an issue. He's one of the all-time greats, Hemingway. So let's talk about research. You worked at a bank.
Yes.
That was the
7 years.
emergency. So several years. So what was it like working in a bank, and how did that experience lend itself to the book?
Well, I worked in a bank branch for 3 years, so I know intimately how the bank branches work, and different, what the tellers do, what the manager does, that sort of thing. So I could recreate, life in a branch bank, perfectly.
Right.
Just a really true description of, how things work and the security systems they use and that sort of thing. And then I worked 4 years in the bank, in the internal audit department. And our job was what they called safeguarding the bank's assets. In other words, ensuring the employees don't steal, and setting up roadblocks so that they can't steal. If you try this is how we're going to catch you. If you try this, there are safeguards everywhere. And I got involved. One of our branches was robbed, and our job was to hustle over there as fast as we could to the branch and count the money and
of course, see what's missing.
Right.
Were bills marked back then?
Pardon?
Were bills marked?
No. Yes, they were.
Okay.
Every teller had 10 marked bills in their cash drawers.
So what was that like, being involved in the robbery? Not involved, but part of having a bank be robbed. What was that like?
Well, we got there. The girls were padlocked to their teller stations, with real handcuffs. There were two robbers. They went in, and the first thing they did was handcuff the tellers to their stations, and then just emptied their cash drawers. And one of the first things we do is keep the tellers isolated and then count all the money in the bank to determine how much is lost. But it's also an ideal time for a teller to stuff a bunch of 20s in her purse, or his wallet or whatever, and make it look like the robber took it. So we have to check that as well. And then say $4,000 is stolen.
Uh-huh.
We'll put in the paper that 8,000 was stolen. Why do we do that?
Yeah, why do you do that?
Because there were two robbers, right?
Uh-huh.
And they typically split the money when after it's over. And if one says, hey, how come I only got 2,000? We split it 50-50, but the paper says there was 8,000. So you've got to have the rest of the money.
So you get them to turn on each other.
Yeah, you get them to turn on each other, and
that's very interesting because modern day they'd call it misinformation. You'd be banned from Facebook. That's that's incredible. That's right. What was usually like police tactics is modern day. You're sentenced to jail. Oh, that's crazy. But that's very interesting.
Yeah,
that's very interesting. They would. I didn't know that. Is that something that's common?
Every bank does it.
Do they still do it?
Yes, they still do it.
They still do it. So you heard it here, folks. If you what you hear in the papers about bank robbers, cut it in half.
Right.
Now, was that part of what you did with cops as citizens-oriented police school?
No. But let me finish with the bank robbery.
No, please go ahead.
They robbed the bank. They went out in the car, and it was a very noticeable car. It was like a yellow car.
You don't see many of those these days.
Well, it was a car that you could pick out very easily in traffic.
Right.
So why did they do that? Why would they want to be in a car that could be
You sound like the worst bank robbers ever.
No. What they did was made sure everybody saw them leaving in this car. And then they had another car parked around the corner. So they dumped the first car and got in this old Ford and took off.
So they looked for the wrong car.
So everybody's looking for this yellow car. And meanwhile, they're just driving off, in a nondescript getaway car.
I got to rethink bank robberies because everything I think is apparently the exact opposite.
Right. So that's what I do in my book is, the robbery in the book, they take off in a, pretty obvious car.
Yeah, and they switch like a clown car.
They've got a pickup truck waiting for them.
Oh, that's crazy. All right, so let's talk about cops.
People say, the book is so realistic that they think this is so realistic. It must have really happened. This can't be a made up story because there's so much detail here.
Well, it's like, nah, man, I'm going off personal experience. That's the best thing to write about.
Yeah. It's personal experience. But
so what's some of the receptions you got that people reach out to you about the book? Obviously, they love it. But like anything that stands out, like a certain review or like a compliment someone gave you, it's like, oh. That's what I'll never forget.
The compliment I get is it's too realistic. I can see this happening.
Yeah.
I can visualize it. This isn't just a fictional story. This really happened because there's just too much detail. And I think that's pretty cool when people say that. Get a lot of comments, people saying it was a lot funnier than I was expecting it to be. And I didn't really mean to write a humorous book, but there is a lot of humor in it. But the best thing I get is when people say, here's my email address. I want to know when your next book comes out. I want to be the first one to know.
Love it.
And that's the greatest compliment I could get. Any
future plans for a new book?
Halfway through it.
Give me a spoiler. Give me a teaser.
It's it's about a synthetic biologist.
Interesting.
Yeah. Creating artificial DNA that can be woven into a person's DNA to cure Alzheimer's, aging, all kinds of things.
How could that possibly go wrong? So it's like a synthetic person trying to play God?
Right, exactly.
Interesting. So it's kind of like they're trying to do like the reverse.
Yeah.
Interesting. When's that? Do you have a published date in mind?
No, it's just actually altering people's DNA.
Oh, that's crazy.
slowing down the aging process.
All right, I like that. I'm looking forward to that. Any
But
idea when it's going to come out?
But there's a twist to it.
Oh, there's a twist to it. Don't tell me a twist. Don't tell us a twist. You guys sell the book first. Let the readers find out what the twist is.
Yeah. So that's fun. But that's what I'm working on now.
All right.
And it also has a little conspiracy theory about the moon.
About the moon.
About something that's on the moon that's not on Earth.
Oh God, is it made of cheese?
No, no. Good guess, but
all right.
No.
So that's the book. That's the book. That's the writing process. I'm gonna pick it up. I'm gonna pick up your book. I promise you, I'm gonna go buy your book, and I'm gonna read it. I'm gonna tell you exactly what I think about it. I can't wait.
Please do. Please do.
You are also, now I'll talk a little bit more about you now, because you have a lot more in your history here. It's very, very interesting.
Yeah. Okay.
So you are also a descendant of Abigail Soames, who, as a teenager, was accused of being a witch during the Salem witch trials.
At the very end of the Salem witch trials.
The very end. So that's when they had to know it was BS. They had to know it was fake. So my first question is, how do you know? How do you know that? How did you know that? How did you find that out?
I actually didn't know that. Maybe 10 years ago, I learned that an uncle that I had, who, like, when I was 12 years old, he moved to Saudi Arabia.
Interesting choice.
And then he moved to Florida, and we kind of lost track of him.
Very interesting choice. That's quite the direction to go in life. Saudi Arabia to Florida.
Well, he went over there to work construction, to build the big just skyscrapers and things like that. He worked for a company out of Houston, on contracts. But I just found that he was back in Maine about 10 years ago, and I sent him an email. I said, "Is this really, my Uncle John, my brother's, my father's younger brother?" And he wrote back and says, "Yep, I'm the one and only." So made important to go up there and see him as quickly as I could and just say, I haven't seen you since I was 12. And we were talking about the family and this and that. And he said he had just discovered about this Abigail Soames through, I think it's through Ancestry.com.
Okay. Yep. They can track some of that stuff. Yep.
Yeah. And he said, if you get a chance, Google her name, Abigail Soames. And they have the newspaper clipping of her trial, and her whole life story. And he says, "You're, a descendant of this Abigail Soames who was tried as a witch."
So what happened to her? Was she innocent or guilty?
It was right at the end of the witch trials, and they acquitted her.
Oh, that's good. That's very good to hear.
But there was only one woman who, accused her of witchcraft, and said that she had spent a year never going out of the house during the daytime. And she claimed it was because she had an illness.
So she's a vampire.
And she could only go out at night. she could only go out at night. But, for a whole year, she stayed inside. And this woman said, I would see in my sleep that she was inside of my body. And at one time, she stabbed me with knitting needles. It sounded like the woman who accused her was crazier than she was.
Sounds like it, for sure. Maybe she was the witch.
Pardon?
Maybe she was the witch.
It could be. But they actually accused her of witchcraft, put her on trial, and they acquitted her. But it was right at the end of the witch trials when things were winding down. But they acquitted her of witchcraft.
Well, how much do you know of the history of the Salem witch trials in general? Because being from Massachusetts, of course I've been there. It's a great place. It's a really crazy, weird place to be. But how much do you actually know about the whole history of the Salem witch trials?
Quite a bit.
Quite a bit. Have you heard about the theory that there was an early frost during that season? Massachusetts winters, and the mushrooms they would normally eat went bad due to the frost. And when they ate them, they turned psychedelic, and they all just lost their mind and accused everyone of being witchcraft. Have you heard about that?
No, I never heard that.
Never heard that? So look into that. That's pretty crazy. The theory is that they were all just tripping from the psychedelic mushrooms, and they all just thought everyone was a witch because they were just seeing things.
Right. No, I never heard that.
Do you believe that? Does that sound believable?
That is unbelievable. No, I'd never heard that.
So what do you know? Fill in some of the blanks in the history of the Salem witch trials.
There was a woman who came from Africa named Tatuba, and she was very charismatic and got all the young girls together. And they think that she was the one who put the witchcraft into these girls' minds. And like my ancestors, they never went outdoors during the daytime. They always kept their curtains closed.
Right.
And one by one, these girls were accused of witchcraft.
I mean, to be fair,
of having magical spells.
If like a bunch of women in my town being accused of being witches, I wouldn't leave the house. I'm not being accused. What are you, crazy? Someone looks at you wrong, they call you a witch, and they throw you in the ocean.
Yeah. Right. Well, that's what they did with the witches.
Yeah.
The ones who were found guilty, they took them out to sea.
They're like, here's what we're going to do. We're going to tie a cinder block to your leg. We're going to throw you in the ocean. If you're a witch, you'll survive. If you're not, you'll die.
That's pretty much it.
It's a win-win. If you're not a witch, you'll die an honorable death. If you are a witch, we'll figure it out afterwards.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Would they also burn at the stake? Was that a real thing? They burn at the stake?
I don't think so.
That's made up. Oh, that's fine. I guess it's better.
Yeah, I don't think so. No.
You ever been to Salem?
Pardon?
You ever been there to Salem?
Many times, yeah.
It's great. It's a beautiful place.
It's the witch city.
It is the witch city. I gotta go back there. It's definitely a place. Especially in October. We're recording this in October. Yeah, I go for spooky season.
But they have haunted houses. They have recreations of the witch trials. A lot of gift stores with witch things. And,
do they do a village like one of those? Like in Sturbridge, they do like the actual the people dress up in colonial clothes. They play the characters. They still do that in Salem.
They do have a haunted village. Yeah.
Oh, the haunted village. Yep, that's it. The haunted village. Man, I miss that growing up, stuff like that in Massachusetts. The whole New England fall scene. Salem.
They have a psychic festival. Where you can go in and get your fortune told, or go back into your past, or communicate with loved ones.
Candy apples and apple cider.
Yes.
Oh, right. You're making me hungry, Barry. You're making me hungry. This sounds so great. I gotta go back there.
There's one place where they will have you take part in a witch's spell, teach you how to cast a spell.
Good place for kids.
Yeah.
During the day. It's not too scared, not too young. 10 years old, 10, 11-year-old kids that have a blast there.
Perfect.
Are you gonna write a book about the Salem witch trials, about your Abigail? No interest?
No.
All right, fair enough. So
I would have to do a lot of research into witchcraft, and
main character just trips on mushrooms half the story. You can't trust what he's saying.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
So your storytelling runs in your blood. So you have a grandfather, who was a Maine storyteller. It was popular was a popular after dinner speaker. So tell me about that.
He was fascinating, because we went up there in the summer and spent a week with him at a time or whatever. And at night, well, he rented cabins. He had like 6 rental cabins in his backyard for tourists. And one night a week, he would have a bonfire and invite all the people over, and he would tell Maine stories. He called them tall tales. And it was mostly about hunting stories, and, how somebody would lose a button off the coat, and it would hit a bird, kill the bird would fall down, and its beak would, hit a fox and kill the fox. It would just go on and on and on.
Crazy shenanigans.
Crazy stories. But they were fantastic stories. It was just great listening to them.
Did he make them all up?
I think he did. He had a partner named Jones Tracy. Together they worked together and improvised a lot. And they actually published a book about their Maine stories. But I think together they made up all the stories. It was really fun.
Did he write any of them down?
No. Well, this book, and all I know that it's him and Jones Tracy, but I have no idea what the title is, and I can't find it.
Do you remember any particular stories that stand out?
No, I don't. I was a little kid. I really don't. And it's too bad.
That's sad.
It's too bad.
That's sad. Was he a major influence on you in becoming a writer?
Yeah.
That's great. That's
Well,
great.
the publisher that I'm working with said, he said, well, you know, when I got your manuscript, he said, first, about 5% of the people that read books want literature. You know, they want studied professional literature. 5%. The other 95% just want to be entertained. Mm-hmm. And he says, when I started reading your manuscript, I said to myself, this guy is sitting right next to me telling me this story. And he said, it was so much fun. It was so real. He said, I really thought you were, you know, just telling me a story like a storyteller would. And that kind of like, oh, that's cool. That was what my grandfather did.
And that's a secret though, isn't it? Make them think it's real. You know, put them in there. Like, I'm currently reading Treasure Island. I actually never read Treasure Island. And I was like, you know, I had it in my bookcase, might as well read it. And there's just certain parts where I'm there. Like people need to start reading more, where like they literally like, because you leave your body. It really is kind of an out of body experience where you're in your mind, you're picturing everything that's happening, and it's just really is a surreal experience.
Yeah.
Are you still a reader? Are you a big reader?
Yep.
What are you currently reading? Like what tickles your fancy these days?
I just read a book about human trafficking because that's going to be in one of my upcoming books. As kind of, this is what it's really like, and this is what we can do to stop it. You know, more of a message than, you know. So I'm reading a lot about human trafficking. It's really unbelievable.
Yeah, that's a tough topic. That's a tough topic to delve into. It's something honestly that's kind of even ignored. Especially with child trafficking in this country, it's ignored.
What I didn't believe is that right now there are 23 million slaves in the world.
Yeah,
actually owned by people.
Yeah, that sounds 100% right. Yeah, definitely.
Actually, you know, and like in Asia, they can buy a child for $150 and they just work them 12 hours a day, you know, 7 days a week until they collapse. Then they just dispose of them and buy another one.
Yeah.
And this is going on today.
Yeah, that does happen today. No, you're 100% right. That's very accurate. You know, people like to complain about problems in America. Don't get me wrong, they're all problems. But then you got, you know, then you got to show a statistic like, you know, children are bought for $150 a day. You know, down south, there's a big problem with child trafficking in parts of the Midwest. Big parts of child trafficking.
Yeah, that's awful. But I had no idea to the extent it was today that it really exists. And they said everybody somewhere in your house is a product that was made by slavery.
Yeah, probably.
In every home in America, whether it's a shirt that was made in
a phone, might as well be slavery.
Yeah. But you know, if it's a shirt that was made in Cambodia or Thailand, you know, instantly, you know, it was made slave labor. A lot of chocolate is you know, harvested by slaves.
Chocolate? I did not know that.
Yeah, and it said the chocolate companies know this. You know, that they're buying chocolate that's been produced by slaves.
Yeah, it's cheap labor, of course.
But, well, they can buy it so cheap it keeps their price down.
Yeah, they don't care. They don't care.
So they were willing to turn their heads to it in the name of profit. So you just got to stop buying candy bars.
Yeah, I guess that's really upsetting. Like you know, there's some facts I wish I didn't know. That's a fact I wish I didn't know. Yeah. Well, good thing my grandfather was not alive because he loved chocolate. He would always sneak chocolate from my grandmother.
Yeah, but most of the slaves are either in agriculture or in textiles.
Yeah, no, definitely, that makes sense. Yeah. All right, so let's end on a happy note.
Okay.
You went to clown school.
Yes.
You were taught by the Ringling Brothers, and Barnum and Bailey circus instructor.
Right.
Now, in my 45 minutes of talking to you, I never, ever would have guessed that you were a clown. So
I went to clown school.
So what was clown school like? Because we see it in TV shows and movies every now and then, but like, is it really like that? Describe a clown school to me.
I flunked unicycles.
It's a great start.
There was absolutely no way. We practiced. We would put our arms around two other people and try to go. And I would go we would go right up this way, or I'd fall over front. I flunked unicycles. It was just
now,
no.
when you're in class, are you dressed in the full garb, makeup, pants, and everything, or is it street
no,
clothes?
just jeans and a t-shirt.
Ah, come on, man! You got to go all the way. It's harder with the big hair and the fake nose.
Okay, maybe a little bit.
Yeah. I know you're holding out on me. What were you really doing in clown school?
To learn how to juggle, I thought this was very cool. We took scarves and just kind of tossed them up in the air and came down, and it was like slow motion, which is a cool way to.
That's awesome. I'm gonna remember that.
You'd start with two scarves. You'd throw one up, pass the other one to your hand. Throw one up, pass the other one, over, so you could be ready to throw it up again and catch the one coming down.
Yeah.
And once you got into a good routine, you could add a third scarf, and that's how you started, learning the hand move, the rhythm. So by doing it that way, you can learn to juggle very quickly.
I bet. It's just in slow motion. So when you do the real thing with like tennis balls or whatever, what have you, it's just super easy.
Yeah.
Is it a lot of like getting the muscle memory down with the scarves?
It's just rhythm.
Rhythm, that too. Rhythm.
Just knowing how hard to throw it, or toss it, and when it's going to come down, so you get that hand free. You just get into this round and around and around. But it's very effective way to learn.
That's crazy. I wish I knew that years ago, because I remember, I forget what class it was. My older brother had to learn juggling for class.
Yeah.
And he was struggling to learn. He couldn't do it. I was like, why are you learning to juggle for school? It's like maybe 5th, 6th, 7th grade or whatever. It's like stupid. But I wish I knew that back then. So you got cycling and juggling. What else do you learn to be what else are the requirements to be a clown?
Well, actually, learn some very cool card games.
Ooh.
Very cool card games. Ones that people just cannot figure out. Great at parties.
Yeah.
But you don't want to do it more than once, because people can catch on.
Yeah.
But if you just do this card trick once and say that, I'll show you another one, just leaves people like, how did he do that? How did he know that? How did he know that 16 cards down was the Jack of clubs? Or there was one where you sing Yankee Doodle Dandy. And like with Yankee, you turn a card over. Doodle, you turn the card over. Dandy, you turn the card over. And when it's over, is the card the person said, that they chose at random. And they said, how did...
Yeah. You know what? I'll ask you off air. Don't spoil the secret. I want to know off air.
No, but I chose the King of Hearts. We shuffled the cards, and then we took one off at a time. After Yankee Doodle Dandy's over, there's my King of Hearts.
There's a King of Hearts.
How did you do that?
Yeah. How do you do that? That's wild.
Yeah.
So that kind of goes into magician territory, right?
Yeah.
So my kindergarten birthday party, we had a clown, and the clown brought a bunny rabbit. Ever do anything with animals? Bunny rabbits?
No.
So did you graduate being a clown?
I would say so.
Okay. How long's the program?
For 2 weeks.
That's it? 2 weeks?
Well, yeah. Well, this was this was an actual, like a semester of, I'm going to be a professional clown. This was just sort of an introduction to clowning.
Amazing. So what was your?
And I had 2 little kids at the time, and I thought this would be a riot.
I bet they loved it.
Yeah.
Boys or girls?
2 girls.
They definitely loved it. Yeah. Daddy's a clown.
Right.
Daddy, do the nose thing.
Yeah.
So what was your favorite part of being a clown?
Distracting people, getting them to look the different way when you're doing something else.
How are your balloon animals?
We never did that. Yes, we did. We did do balloon animals. I don't remember it too well, but I do remember we tied balloons. We made little dogs and stuff.
That's hard. See, I thought that I'm surprised that even introduction to clown school is only 2 weeks. I thought it would be.
Oh no, this was more of an introduction this is a retired clown who taught at Ringling Brothers, and he's in Maine now. And he offered this through one of the universities.
Was it easier or harder than you thought it would be?
I was very discouraged with the unicycles.
Yeah. To be fair, a unicycle's very hard. That looks very, very difficult.
But the thing was, some people picked up on it really quickly.
It's just balance, right? Just all balance and coordination.
Balance, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what else could it be?
But it's balance and it's moving. You're pushing and keeping your balance at the same time. I couldn't do it.
We get to juggle on the unicycle.
Right. Yeah. No, it was fun.
I was telling my girlfriend we gotta go see the Big Apple Circus. I haven't been to the Big Apple. It's coming back. The Big Apple Circus is post-COVID. It's finally coming back. They're doing the first shows, I think, in a few weeks. And I was like, we should go. I haven't been there since kindergarten. I don't remember any of it.
Have you ever seen Cirque du Soleil?
No.
Oh, beyond description. Incredible.
I bet. Yeah. Do they have a lot of like stuff like that up in Maine? Like I guess circuses, fairs, stuff like that?
There's one annual circus that comes in the springtime, but we really have to go to Boston.
Yeah. I remember growing up, we went to Clark's Trading Post. I think it's in Vermont or New Hampshire.
I believe it's in New Hampshire.
It's probably New Hampshire.
Lincoln, New Hampshire.
Yeah. So Clark's Trading Post was like a fair. They had bears. I remember bears. Like
it's the bears. Yeah.
They had like that's on Five Nights at the Lie. They had the bears like in like a pen doing tricks or whatever, and they had this train ride through the forest and the Wolf Man.
Yeah.
And the Wolf Man scared the living hell out of me.
Yeah.
And I remember this very vividly. My parents love telling the story where we're walking through like the little village or whatever, and the guy who plays the Wolf Man is like off duty, is walking through going home. And I see him just go, oh, and just start booking it, running as fast as I can from the Wolf Man.
No.
Just stuff like that, man. Stuff like that. And that's why I like talking to people, because especially on a podcast like this, because it's like, what's gonna come out? What is gonna be said today on this podcast? It's just gonna be absolutely unbelievable. If you told me an hour ago I'd be telling a story about the Wolf Man when I was 5 years old, I'd call you a liar. But Barry, that's the joy of podcasting. That's the glory of podcasting. Yeah. Thank you very much for being on the show. I hope you had a good time. Your first podcast, how hard was it? How do you think it did?
Can I do a real quick show and tell?
Yes, please. Yes, I beg you.
Okay, this is pretty cool. This is the cover of my book.
No, I got it right there. Perfect.
See that?
Yep.
So you've got the banker and you've got people in teller's line, right? Okay. When it got time to do the cover design, the publisher asked me if I had anything in mind. You've written the book, what would you like to see on the cover? So I did stick figures,
Oh my God, that's exactly what I would do.
That's what I did.
I can write, but I can't draw for my life.
But that's what I did, and that's what they come up with. But when they received this, the publisher called me back and he said, I showed your sketch to the art department, and they said, brilliant, let's go with it.
Oh,
and I said, God. No.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
But then they put this cover together, and it just was perfect. Just exactly what I was hoping for.
All right, Barry, before we go, any final stories, any final comments, any final questions for me even?
No, I think we're good.
All right, man. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Barry Soames, the author of Beware of the Banker. Get it on Amazon or his website. Barry, thank you so much for being on the podcast for your very first podcast. I thought you did great. I thought we had a great conversation. I had a great time. I hope you did too.
Oh, I sure did. Really enjoyed it.
All right, man. You got to get on these more often and sell this book. Any final things you want to promote? Your website again, social media handles, anything you want to promote, plug away? The floor is yours.
The website is where I keep up to date on what I'm up to, what my plans are. It's paperbackwriter.biz, B-I-Z, like business, paperbackwriter.biz. And I keep up to date, as far as what's going on. You can order the books through the website. It's a great place for information. And there's a place you can email me with your email address, and I'll send you emails not every day or every week, but just to keep you up to date as to what's going on. And as soon as my next book is on the stands, I'll let you know.
All right, Barry, I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to pick up a copy of your latest book and make sure I read it before that happens. And ladies and gentlemen, that has been Barry Soames, author of Beware of the Banker again.
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Will Tarashuk. That's T as in Thomas, Arashuk. This has been Talking with Tarashuk. All of my shenanigans, all my other podcasts can be found over at Ambiguous PodcastSolutions.com. If you are out there and you are an author and want to tell your story, or you have any other reason to want to be on this podcast you think I might find you interesting, feel free to reach out to me at will@apspodcast.com. That's APSPODCAST.com. And let me know why you want to be on the show, and we'll get it scheduled. But until then, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back next time with a brand new host, brand new guest talking about, I don't know, we'll see. That's the joy of it. But until then, pick up the book, keep reading. It's good for your brain. Keep listening to the podcast, also good for your brain. And we'll be in touch because I'll see you next time. Thank you all.
Good night.